Hey, Vincent, thanks for joining us here. As we were discussing on Monday, there's a lot of shakeup in the office market, obviously, in terms of sales prices, steep discounts, aggressive leases that we're negotiating. So we thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and record a little video talking about that. And so I guess I'll start by saying the biggest trend that we're seeing right now are just an historic buying opportunity in office. It's the norm, not the exception, to see these buildings selling at a fire sale or going into foreclosure at extremely steep discounts, anywhere from 30 to 70%. The building across the street just went under foreclosure. I'm in proposals, and a building in West Chase that's under foreclosure. I feel like probably half of the buildings we're working on right now just went into foreclosure.
A little scary.
Yeah, exactly. It is, or is at risk of going into foreclosure. So what that means is there's a great buying opportunity for our owner occupied clients, tenant clients that they want to stop spending money on rent. They can go buy a property at a steep discount. Now there are some limitations, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it's a real thing we're seeing right now. As I know, we're both working with clients purchasing properties. My last one was in town, Interloop, a law firm. We purchased a 45,000 square foot office building. It was originally listed at $8 million. And we're like, okay, how about 5 million? No. How about 5 million? No. How about 5 million? No. And then over the passage of time, we ended up going under contracting and buying it for $5 million. And I was telling my client we got to lease it up a little bit, but it's very easy to see that we'll be able to sell that thing if we want to in a couple of years for $7 or $8 million. The funny thing, we were meeting with the seller, the property insurance on this building was actually for $11 million. And we're like, why do you have $11 million worth of replacement value here? And he said, well, that's how much we have into it. They had 11 in, selling it for 8. We bought it for 5. And that would be an example of a true home run, but as those things exist.
Yeah, it's much easier, it seems, for a client to want that property in the loop and kind of by the Galleria or Post Oak area and find something like that. It's a big steal. With all these Class B and C office buildings that we see, like you said, in West Chase or even Northwest Houston or other parts of town where they just built so much in the 80s and 90s, and there's so much product, even the late 70s, just so much product out there. There's just not enough tenants to actually fill these things up. And in the West Chase, you're seeing things price per square foot wise just going from $40 a square foot they're asking for these multi-tenant office buildings that are 40, 50,000 square feet. So the Class B and C office buildings really present the biggest bang for your buck as far as buying a multi-tenant type of asset. The amenities aren't there that they have, so there's not really much to where an investor has to come in and put all those in to attract more tenants to come into their buildings, because the B and C buildings, there's so many out there, they're so alike, so similar to each other, to where it's the only way to get them off the market and not have them stay on the market for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is to offer just a steep price to sell it for. And that's really the only way to get off your hands.
And I would say, Vincent, probably the biggest trend that I'm seeing, as you said, is the greatest buying opportunity for in Class B and Class C. Class A properties, particularly plus, are holding their value better, but it's also about location. And so we're seeing the most distress in the Class B and C market, but in the urban markets, in town. In the suburban markets out closer to employees, it's all about the commute first and foremost. And we'll talk about amenities here in a little bit, but my view is it's mostly about the commute for the
Oh,
employee.
yeah.
But out in the suburbs, some of those B and C buildings are doing just fine. And when I got into the business, the real estate, I just location, 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 right? And that's always been true. Sometimes I'd roll my eyes a little bit about that, but for sure now it is all about that location.
And I would say in Sugar Land, there's just not enough product out there to where you have to go to those B and C buildings sometimes to put your business in, because you want to stay close to home, because Sugar Land just hasn't built up as much office product as far as multi-tenant office product in that 40, 50,000 square foot range that compared to like a West Chase or somewhere else closer into town. That's where there's just so much product that there's not enough tenants to get in there.
Right.
People aren't living close to those spots of town. Even Park 10 near Katy is just seems more and more advantageous for them to be in Park 10 area, where it's the cheaper office rates of the anywhere from 18 to $25 a square foot for Class B office buildings. But also in Park 10, that part of town, they're doing a lot to attract new tenants with the amenities and putting in food
Yeah.
service and putting in gyms and outdoor areas and common areas and tenant lounges to attract more of those Katy residents and the Katy business owners who live
Yeah.
nearby and want to actually go into the office but don't want to drive 30 minutes, to get to the office. So
Yeah.
Katy and Sugar Land are really some of the best parts to where the Class B and C buildings, those assets are doing a little better because more people are living in those parts of town. They don't want to commute so far, but also, especially in Sugar Land, I just don't think there's enough product down in Sugar Land to where you can pick and choose where you want to go. It's either, hey, you have these choices of 4 or 5 buildings that are Class B in Sugar Land.
Yeah, same thing for Katy, Woodlands, to a certain extent out in Cypress, Champions Forest area. It's just tighter. And I also don't want to gloss over, you mentioned it, the amenities. That's a huge part of if you're buying a property and expect to lease it up, you need to add more amenities if they're not there. And then what we're really seeing on the leasing side, our clients and these businesses are making decisions to lease space based off of their amenities. And it's sometimes I still view it's most about location, but I view it like apartment shopping that had a great little tenant area with a pool table and a movie theater room. And then maybe you don't even hardly use it. And you got to check the box. And so you mentioned the fitness center, in my view, is like one of the most important things. If you have a fitness center, that's huge. Tenant lounges are huge. Any type of on-site dining is huge, or any walkability to dining. Conference centers are great. Some of them, it's really important. Some of the Class A stuff, you can't do this in a Class B or C built in the 80s, but anything new, we're seeing those rooftop terraces and gardens.
Yeah, I had a good story about just specifically a tenant lounge of where
Yeah,
it's a classic story of a tenant who's occupying a lot of space in a Class B building and wants to lower the square footage after COVID and wants to get into a Class A building. Just one of those classic cases. And of course, they want a break room in their space. Like everyone wants a break room in their space for employees to get away for a little bit, just to decompress from work and have their own little private space. But when you get into a smaller suite, it's harder to get that
right,
more privacy. And even if you do have a break room that's closed off, there's still people on top of you right outside the door
right,
that you can hear talking on the phone or just selling or doing whatever they do. I ended up finding a space on the first floor for a client and a smaller square footage, a nice Class A building that they liked, but didn't have a break room. And sometimes those could be a deal killer for clients. So with no break room, how much is it going to cost? You tell them how much it costs, how much they think it must to do a lease term for 7 years.
right,
So sometimes it can be a deal killer. In this case, they're building out a tenant lounge literally right next door to the space that they liked. And so this tenant lounge was nice, open, had a nice new fridge, new countertops, granite countertops, a big open area for people to sit, couches, a couple TVs out there, a coffee machine. And
right.
so what my client did is, let's just take this space right next to where they're putting the tent lounge at, to be brand new. And instead of having a break room in our suite and paying for it, they're already putting this tent lounge right next to us. We can just literally walk out the door, go to the tent lounge, have our employees just eat their lunch out
Right.
there, have coffee out there, and just watch some TV out there, just decompress outside the suite itself, and not
Yeah,
have to go up the floor to
right,
get there. It was such an easy sell for them. Hey,
right.
room, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and same thing, same concept for the conference room. That's another big one that I just mentioned, because then that's less square footage you have to take and pay in your rent. And then same thing with, it's all about culture. So, the silly putting green outside or any type of park. I know these pickleball courts are coming. I know some landlords,
yeah,
they plan on putting a
yeah.
pickleball court.
It's
And I think
huge.
tenants are going around, they're touring and they see that and they're like, oh, we can have our company function here. We can have this outdoor tenant lounge space. Like that's going to, assist in their culture building. So it's super important.
Yeah,
But back to owner occupied purchase opportunities, we're just talking about these crazy discounts, 30 to 70% off their pre COVID
yeah,
valuation. And you got to buy right. But I assume some of those are going to come back to their prior valuation. This is going to be huge money making opportunity right now. But there are limitations, right? And so
yeah.
can you maybe talk a little bit about the limitations you're seeing in terms of square footage, size, that kind of thing.
Yeah, owner user stuff is just, if you want to be anywhere near the city, you're going to be expected to find something where they're asking $300 to $500 a square foot for these owner user buildings.
Yeah.
Whereas these big, large multi-tenant buildings, 40,000 square feet and up, they're getting a steep discount because the tenant base isn't there to actually fill these things up. These owner occupier buildings in town, or even any place in Sugar Land or Katy, anywhere else, even just office condos, are asking these steep prices for a purchase. And you're having clients who have $1.5 million or $2.5 million budget, and saying that the only options that are out there in that budget are this 5,000 square foot office building that was built in 1980 or 1990 with 7 parking spaces is what's going to get you an owner occupied office in the loop in the city where you want to be. for that price tag. So it's difficult. It's good for the asset itself. It seems like those keep steadily rising and rising over time as owner user occupied buildings, in that 3,000 square foot to 10,000 square foot range. But that's the only way to where we're seeing a little bit difficult for purchasing an office asset is in that owner occupied type of asset.
It's a supply demand issue with these
Mhm.
smaller and bigger buildings. Buyers of smaller buildings, sub 40,000 square feet, there's a high supply of those buyers and a high
Yeah.
demand of those buyers and a low supply. And if it's in town, the cost of land is so steep that you have to go vertical, and there's just not as many small office buildings in town. And so the ones that are there are super expensive because you got a long line of people wanting to buy them. Now it's not as bad out in the suburbs because the cost of land is less, but still the small buildings have a long line of buyers. And so those values have
Yeah, and they'll keep on the market for months and months to get the price that they want. Buildings price decrease of $400,000 or $300,000 of the asking price just because you want it and because your client's budget is that they know someone's going to come and buy it because the price of land, like you said, is raising in the city, and that's where they know that's where people want to be.
yeah.
And close to the restaurants, the retail, or anything else you can think of, that everything's nearby and easy access to. It's just crazy to see how these buildings are asking such a high asking price when there's only 7 to 10 parking spots even on the lot, which is just crazy to think. Like employees can't have to park on the street for this $2 million property that they're
Yeah.
selling. So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things to where that's what the market is. That the supply is not there, like you said. Demand is there. These owners, the clients that we have, that everyone wants to own something, have their own building, even if it's a 3,000 square foot to 10,000 square foot building, they want to own their own instead of stop paying rent. But once they see what they're going for, and let's say you're in the Greenway Plaza already, you're in Post Oak or you're in River Oak somewhere, and yeah, you're leasing space there. You want to stay nearby too as well because you like the area already. Say, let's buy something nearby. And then once you actually see the pricing for it, you go on a couple tours. Those owner occupied clients end up saying, maybe we should just lease because I like the
Right.
area and I don't want to pay
Right. Yeah.
$500,000 on payment for something.
And then going back to leasing, I guess that is a trend. The smaller companies want to buy, and then maybe that doesn't make sense because they can't stomach the larger buildings. We're seeing these huge discounts. So then we look at leasing, and that's actually where we are seeing some crazy discounts off of asking prices. It is the norm, not the exception, to get 20 to 30% off of asking prices on an effective rate basis. There are reductions on the rental rate, high tenant improvement allowances, high free rent packages, preferred tenant and favored provisions. So it's a great time to negotiate a tenant. But again, there is a caveat that most of the Class B and C buildings is where we're seeing the discounts, and the Class A, not so much.
Yeah.
However, really, there's still opportunities in Class A. You just have to temper your expectations. And I was thinking through a couple of examples. I just worked with a oil and gas firm, a full floor, proper energy corridor. And we did call it maybe a 3-year sublease and then 5-year expansion on the direct end. And so we got an extreme discount on the sublease for 3 years. And I think we captured a great deal there because we are seeing companies move out west. So we're able to scoop up that sublease at a steep discount for 3 years. And then we did a direct deal on the back end with the landlord where this landlord, I just love this landlord. I want to work with him again, but he offered us free rent package to use, even though the new term doesn't start for another four years, and offered us a notable tenant improvement allowance and allowed us to use some of that now to renovate the sublease space and not have to wait until 4 years to make our upgrade. Yeah, so I thought that was really good. And then I've actually had a recent learning experience with one of my call center clients where this is again out Park 10 area, west of Energy Corridor. And I thought that we were at the point where we're best and final, but we wanted to push a little bit more, right? That's our role, is to push a little more. I really thought we were done. And then they ended up agreeing to, one, it's a phase in, so they don't have to use 7,000 square feet. They don't have to pay on 1,000 of it for the first 2 years. In addition to that, a very notable additional 12 full months of free rent on the entire premises, but 2 years on the 1,000 square feet, complete turnkey, brand new build out. And we got them $150,000 moving allowance that would pay for all of my clients moving, and they got all new furniture. Like the ask was huge, and I was skeptical. I was surprised that they came back. They added 2 years on the term in exchange, but I was like, man,
Yeah.
like this is not this is not over by any means, and have similar stories. Did a law firm in West Chase where we got a year free and $12 triple net. Literally went from a class B building to a class A minus building, and the effective rate was less than what they were paying in the class B building. These are the highlights. You got to find the deals. You got to know where to go, but it's
Yeah, it
easy.
seems like these deals or these Class B buildings, especially B and C, they're especially to have institutional ownership that have the money to put up front for these allowances. As far as TI allowance is always a big one that tenants know. When we talk about furniture and fixtures and equipment and moving allowances and any unused TI allowance that can be used for rental credits. And once you start going to that language and knowing, seeing that, kind of they're seeing their eyes pop up when you point that out to them about, hey, like this is how soft the office market is in Houston. We can ask for these things and get them if we
Yeah.
want. To where it's like those make us look like we're superheroes when we can bring that up to them and get those for them because they're already factoring in the moving allowance when they're calculating this move with their office administrators or figuring out how much is all going to cost, and they know that hey, we're getting allowance for moving and for furniture as well. It just makes it even easier to get to sell that Class B building or even a Class C building that they're going to. It just make us look like we're superheroes for negotiating this great deal when in fact this landlord needs a deal more than we do. So they're going to do whatever they can, especially the institutional ownership and have that money to give out like that. It's harder whenever it's just a landlord who has 4 or 5 buildings and one of them is a multi-tenant office building and they're already just hamstrung with not having enough tenants in their building that they're paying
Yeah.
for $1 million for. Those are the hardest deals to do whenever it's a Class B building and you have a soft office market and their vacancy is bad, but they still won't give out the most for the deal because they're just such a small landlord and they just can't see the
Or they
value.
can't, or their hands
Yeah,
are
they
tied. I
can't.
mean,
Yeah,
some
they
of
can't
these,
do it.
it's like you
Yeah.
have to understand the cycle, right? And if they if the building was just purchased, likely at a steep discount, then they're at a lower basis, they're ready to wheel and deal. But if they're at the end of their financing cycle, and these lenders, by the way, another trend, they're not reworking anymore. It's time to put up or shut up, no
Yeah.
more pretend and extend. Their just hands are tied. They just don't have the money. They know that they're going to lose the building, so they're not motivated to offer a lot of tenant improvement allowance or lower the deal. Their hands are just tied. But
Yeah.
it just occurred to me, like moving on, I guess it would be remiss not to just mention COVID and the impact and the trends that we're seeing in the office market. And I've always said that there is a disconnect between what business owners and tenants are reading in the headlines versus what's actually happening in the
Yeah.
real world. So we just talked a whole lot about how prices are dropping, we're negotiating these great deals. That's certainly true. But there still is a disconnect between our clients' expectations and what we're actually seeing in the marketplace. And that's because there has been a shift out of the office. We have seen downsizing post COVID, but it's not for every industry and it's not in every circumstance. And so there's still many industries out there, medical, legal, lots of different industries that still need to very much be in their office space, and that hasn't changed. And then also personal Oxford partners, we represent very large companies. We work on a national basis. We represent publicly traded companies. But for the most part, we represent mid-level companies, regional companies on the office side, 15 employees to 300 employees. To wrap it up a little bit, let's go 10,000 feet view and start talking more macroeconomically. Obviously, Houston and Texas, where we're based, is a big benefactor of this. But let's just talk about business environment, population shifts, where we're seeing where the stronger office markets that are having less pain.
Yeah.
What are you seeing there?
As far as the population shifts, I think you can go look up any article online that Texas is one of the biggest benefactors of population shift in the past ever since COVID happened for many reasons. So more business friendly, more freedom to run a business with your life too in Texas and in other states, less government regulation and oversight. And then also with Houston too, the industrial side has really just been picking up. I know we're talking more office, but the industrial side picks up in Houston, and manufacturing and distribution is picking up. Of course, the office and the companies in the city are going to get an impact from that as well too. That doesn't have to be industrial; it can also be just office.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Obviously, like the locations that are innovating in the technology, AI,
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of what you read in the headlines the most, but then you also have the kind of infrastructure expansion and many markets, including Houston. We've really reinvested and expanded our infrastructure, and that kind of that raises the bar for all businesses in that region. And so that helps. And then low tax, like you mentioned, low tax, low regulatory environments just makes it easier.
It
So
seems like
Texas,
it
go
seems like
ahead.
Houston made a big push to be more of a tech hub and an innovation
Yeah.
hub. Whereas when you think of Texas and the innovation and tech, you think Austin. Houston's been a big push in the past 5 to 10 years of being really tech heavy as much as possible and being a hub to have tech companies come over to Houston as well too, not just
Yeah.
being just a bubble in Austin. They want Houston to be known for that as well. Of course, we lead the world in our medical advances and our medical center and everything that comes with it. Just off of that, it just brings tech advances.
Right. Yeah, but even outside of Texas, though, right? All the usual suspects. There's expansion in other areas, but heavily in the Sun Belt state, Texas,
Oh
Florida,
yeah,
North Carolina, Tennessee, Nevada, all those usual suspects.
yeah.
So,
The weather states too. Better way of life. Not having to shovel snow off your car every
yeah,
morning. We get
that's
a
right.
good snowstorm
Yeah.
the other month, which is pretty
Yeah, yeah. I think what we're really expecting, as we talked about on Monday, is like the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 years is really going to define like the future of the office investment market, or just it's going to mostly, I think, work itself out. There's going to be a lot of opportunities in the lease space and the purchase space and office. But there's still some remaining pain. It's happening real time right now, but we still have 2 or 3 years of a lot of these office buildings coming up for refinance. No more pretend and extend. So we're going to pain. We're going to see more buildings that are now purchased at a lower basis. That's yet to be seen on how much of that will actually impact the leasing market more. I say a lot of times these buildings, there's a certain level of them that are now purchased at a lower basis. They're trying to offer 5 or 10% under their bloated competition that haven't gone through that cycle yet. And I think as more and more of those kind of get recycled, there is a potential that we'll start continuing to see a softening, or at least we'll maintain where we're at right now. I don't believe in this like steep rebound. It's going to be several years. And
yeah.
so that's the case. Any company that's looking to buy or lease property, kind of reposition their operations, think about their talent pool and how to attract more talent. Now is a great time to be looking at that. And we'll have, I think, several more years of it. Any company that's looking to renegotiate their lease at better terms with the lease expiration 2 years or under, any company that's looking to potentially purchase a property in the next couple of years, or maybe want to do something now and then do a lease renegotiation, buyout, or sublease, it's certainly now is the right time to do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm telling my prospects when I go meet with them is take advantage of this time they have right now because we still have enough time to get what you want at an aggressive rate. And like you said, those early renewals, hey, let's do it now.
Well, thanks, Vince. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks, man.